Welcome everybody to our final Sunday message in our month of prayer from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And today is also a day when we are due to share in communion together, and you'll find that in a separate video, so do join us if you're able. Today's message is entitled Love Bears All Things, Believes All Things, Hopes all things, endures all things. This is a good message for the time of the coronavirus, isn't it? And it comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. Love is tenacious. I once read a story of a difficult young man who was continually in trouble with the police over drugs and stealing. He had been arrested and jailed several times and eventually was sent to prison for much of his remaining life. After a short time in prison, he was forgotten by his friends and even by his father. Outside the walls of his prison cell, he was a forgotten human being, except for one person. Every week his mother would board a bus and travel for several hours to visit him in prison. After a few hours of visitation, she would board the bus and return home. Almost daily, she wrote letters and often sent books and personal items as allowed by the prison officials. Not distance, prison walls, money, or time could stop her from loving and visiting her son. Some people think that very loving people are weak and spineless, but nothing could be further from the truth. Unloving people are the ones who are weak because they are controlled by their own self-image. Jesus was the most loving person who ever existed, and he was not weak. He gave his life to save others. Paul's continual concern for the Corinthians, after all the heartache they had caused him, demonstrated not weakness but rather great strength and endurance, and resulted, among other things, in the amazing passage about love that he wrote to them and which we are studying together. Paul concludes and summarizes his description of love with 4 short positive clauses that tells us what love does. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love bears all things. Love bears up under the heavy load of life's problems and sufferings. It remains steadfast and strong despite opposition, deprivation, and hard work. Love is courageous. It can carry an enormous weight. Loving leaders need an amazing ability to endure all sorts of suffering and frustration for the sake of others and the gospel, as it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And this is also a trait of all good shepherds, as it says in Genesis chapter 31. They persevere and do not give up easily or fall apart under pressure. Love believes all things. Paul brings out faith and hope together with love because of their connection with bearing and endurance. Faith and hope are the parts of love that enable it to endure hardship and to bear up under the burdens of life. In dealing with loved ones, love is not suspicious or cynical, but open and favourably disposed towards them. It seeks to understand each person in the best light, with an understanding of life's complexities. It believes that people can change and improve. It sees their worth, potential, and future possibilities. It considers motives and makes all possible allowances. It's not afraid of being proved wrong or feeling embarrassed. This doesn't mean that love is credulous or blind, for that would be spurious faith. it is understood that love does not believe lies. Jesus' dealings with his disciples, with their weaknesses and failures, demonstrate Christ-like love that knows the truth, but adds belief and hope to it. Love trusts God and his word, and this makes all the difference in how we view and respond to people with their difficult problems. Faith views people and life through the lens of God's purposes for them. And faith reassures us that in all things God works together for the good of those who love him. Romans 8. It believes that nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, and that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion on the day of Jesus Christ. Nothing is impossible with God. Love hopes all things. The other core ingredient of love is hope. The situation in the church in Corinth was a mess, but Paul never gave up hope for them. He didn't despair. He didn't give up on them in frustration. He wrote letters, he visited, he sent representatives, and he prayed. Despite his stern words, he has confidence that they would eventually respond. Paul expressed his confidence in them. I have great pride in you. I'm filled with comfort. In all our affliction, I overflow with joy. I rejoice because I have complete confidence in you. These verses from 2 Corinthians. His confidence is not just sentimental, but rather faith in God's ultimate triumph and in God's good intentions for these people. This gives him a realistic optimism and confidence in the future, even in the face of repeated difficulties and disappointments. Hope in the Lord and trust in his sure promises enable Paul to put the problems and failures into perspective. And love endures all things. This quality, endurance, is similar to the first, bearing all things. Love is strong and tenacious. No hardship or rebuff makes love cease to love. Love lasts. It holds out. It perseveres in the face of opposition, unkindness, and difficulties. It never gives up. Serving Christ and his people cannot be done without labour and self-sacrifice. Love gives us the power to endure. The life of Moses, perhaps Israel's greatest leader, illustrated that love bears up, believes, hopes and endures all things. For 40 trying years he led the nation of Israel through the desert of Sinai. The people repeatedly complained about his leadership. They falsely accused him of abuse, ineptitude, evil motives, pride, and even leading them and their children to death. At one time they were ready to stone him. On one occasion his own brother and sister complained about him. Perhaps they envied his influence. They said, "Has the Lord only spoken through Moses? Has he not also spoken through us?" This is in Numbers chapter 12. It must have been so painful for Moses when his own family and closest friends attacked him. Yet he prayed for them and forgave them and asked God to restore them when they were punished for their sinful judgments. One of the worst moments in Moses' life was when 250 prominent leaders of the nation accused him of being a dominating leader. Then Moses said to Aaron, "You've gone too far. Why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the wilderness, that you also make yourself a prince over us? Moreover, you have not yet brought us into the land flowing with milk and honey." This was the complaint of the people about Moses. In the end, they wanted to reject Moses' authority altogether and appoint a new leader to take them back the way they'd come. This is in Nehemiah 9. On this occasion Moses prayed to God to punish them for their wickedness, and God did. This punishment was long overdue. At other times, however, Moses prayed that God would not destroy the people. On 4 different occasions God was about to destroy them because of their continual rebellion. But Moses prayed and pleaded with God to spare them. Moses probably could have thought of 100 reasons not to pray for them, but as a man of God he was able to rise above personal feelings and pray earnestly for their forgiveness and deliverance. Only love for God and love for the people explains Moses' forbearance with the children of Israel. Leaders need this kind of love. Love that suffers long, endures all things, believes all things and hopes all things. Time after time, when it appeared that all was lost, Moses trusted, hoped, and endured. Selfish leaders melt like snowflakes when the heat is on. They do not persevere. Significant ministry with folks is relational and has to last. Long-term ministry succeeds only with supernatural power from above to endure all of the hardships and heartaches. Some cross-cultural missionaries serve for a lifetime in dangerous areas where the problems and setbacks never end. How do they last? The answer: love for God and love for people. Love generates the faith, hope, and endurance needed to persevere through a lifetime of problems. Thanks be to God for these lessons on love from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and also for Alexander Strauch, who wrote these studies. May the Lord bless you, and may he help us all to grow and grow in love and in grace. Remember that the Lord has promised us, "My grace is sufficient for you."